Awesome.
put in or take out here, but we didn't get the funds to take them out or put them in. So it's going to allow to put the floats in and take them out, and also perform any annual repairs for the boat ramp floats. Okay, great. So
I think we've got your presentation up now.
great.
Oh,
So we
great.
can,
Thank you.
we can move on to the first page of the presentation. So as I believe everyone knows, the Harbormaster's office is the Marine Division of the Police Department. As I'm sure you're aware from the Chief of Police, we serve with the same mission. The services we provide are somewhat different to some degree. We provide all the same public safety services that the police department provides on land. I provide those on the water with the assistance of my staff. But we also provide protection of the harbor, protection of life and property, and we educate the boaters. We enforce the laws, regulations governing the navigable waters. We also patrol the islands. There's 5 islands within the town. We respond to all the calls on the islands. And we also respond to issues on the shore fronts. That's kind of our public safety role. We also have a harbor management aspect to our job. That's the mooring management that we do every year, the issuing of the mooring permits, the stationing of vessels on moorings and in slips, taking people off waiting lists and locating within the harbor. We also have different projects that we work on from time to time, such as the harbor dredging. Right now, as I mentioned, we're doing the boat ramp replacement project. We have 5 islands that also require management and maintenance from time to time. We have different transient moorings throughout town that we rent on a weekly basis or a daily basis to people. We have a pump out service that goes out to a boat that goes out to people's boats, and it pumps the waste out of their boat. That's when I say waste, that's like human waste. After they go to the bathroom and it's in a tank, the boat will go out to their boat and pump out the waste. We also have a shoreside pump out station at Town Pier that people can bring their boat into, and they can offload that waste. And there's 2 islands that people can camp on in town. There's Bumpkin Island, which is much larger. There's roughly 40 campsites or so. 40 people can be camping on it. But we also have Langley Island, which is much smaller. It has about 2 campsites, and we manage the camping on Langley Island, whereas Bumpkin Island is managed by the DCR for camping. We also have shellfish. As a shellfish constable, that's another one of my duties. We also have shellfishing in town. We haven't talked much about shellfishing in the last number of years because really hasn't been happening because of some widespread disease that has gone through the region, kind of wiping out the shellfish beds. But the last 3 or 4 months, the shellfish diggers have been in town, and our shellfish beds have really kind of come back to life, and they're actually going to be here for the next 12 months. So I anticipate that in the next year, we'll hear some more talk of shellfishing, and I'm actually looking at bringing back some shellfish constables, which we haven't had for some time, but I think they'll be valuable to help manage the shellfish harvesting that's going on. So those are the main services that we provide here at the Harbormaster's office. Next slide, please. I just like to kind of bring this chart up every year because a lot of people think that Hingham Harbor is just down by the Rotary, and if you're getting tired of saying this, I apologize, but you can see that little A, it's kind of in the middle of the screen there. I can't really point to it for you, but that A is down by the Rotary. Yeah, exactly right there. That's down by the Rotary. That's where everyone's familiar with. We think of that as Hingham Harbor, and you look out, you see Bumpkin Island or Button Island there where the fireworks go off, and then you see Langley, Ragged, and Sarah Island, the other 3 islands, and then you've got the yacht club. So everyone's kind of familiar with that. We think of that as Hingham Harbor, but that's just one small part of it. It extends all the way out to where the letter D is. That's Bumpkin Island. That's the large island there where we have lots of campers. And then it extends all the way around to where letter C is. That's over into World's End. Over there, we can have 300 or 400 boats on a weekend day, rafting and enjoying that area of the harbor. And then it extends all the way down into the shipyard, where we have the letter E there, up into, and then down to the back river, F. So Hingham Harbor is actually many harbors. It's quite expansive geographically, and it's much larger than just the little area that people tend to think of down by the bathing beach and the Rotary. So I just like to put that up because it's important for people to realize how big the area that we actually patrol and have boating taking place. Within this area, not only do we have all the moored vessels, we have water ski areas that people are water skiing in. We have people that are scuba diving, all kinds of different activities that are taking place. If anyone has any questions about any of these slides, just feel free to chime in. Next slide, please. I like to just provide a little bit of the benchmarks. This past year, we had approximately 190 calls for service. Those were calls for, I don't want to always say emergency services, but they were calls for a patrol boat to come and assist in some nature. We had over 600 log entries, and those were calls for services that didn't necessarily need a patrol boat. That might have been a call for service with a pump out or something like that. So we had over 600 total calls for services, but we had roughly 190 calls for pump out or for patrol services within the boating season. That was from June roughly through August, early September. And of those 190, there were roughly 50 incidents. And you'll see listed beneath the 50 incidents, you'll see in there some of the different incidents that we had, as well as some of the different violations that were issued. For instance, we issued approximately 50 or more no-wake violations and stuff. So that's just to kind of give you an idea for some of the different calls that we responded to in the past year. Next slide, please.
Nancy, can you full screen that?
I can't because it's a PDF. It's not a PowerPoint. It's a PowerPoint and a PDF.
This slide here kind of just shows a little bit of the specifics on the pump out services itself. We provided approximately 480 hours of pump out services this past season, pumping over 10,000 gallons of waste from approximately 455 boats. As you can see, this was very high level of gallons removed. It was up significantly from 2020, where we had significant amount of challenges with performing the pump out services. But we were able to get the service provided this year, and there was definitely a need for that service, and we were able to provide it to the boaters. This is provided to people. They leave their boats on the moorings, and they'll actually make a reservation. The boat will go out and pump the boat on the mooring when it's unoccupied. But then on the weekends, the boat will go through World's End and other areas of the harbor where people are on their boats. They'll call and make the request, and the boat will show up and pump the boat out while people are on it. So that was the services that the pump out boat provided this past year, and that's a picture of the boat in the bottom right-hand corner. Next slide, please. Mooring management sounds like it's kind of just a simple task of just putting boats on a mooring, but it's a little bit more involved than that. We have over 2,000 slip and mooring locations presently throughout the harbor. There's 5 different mooring areas, and all these mooring areas have wait lists, and people come. So when we have a new mooring position open up, we select people from the wait list based upon the order. And then if you look at the chart to your right there, you'll see that there's different, colored boats with basically with the rope and the chain in front of it. They all have a swing radius. So it's not just taking a boat and putting it on a mooring, but it's selecting the appropriately sized mooring and location, and making sure that the boats around it aren't going to interfere with that boat. and so forth, and placing them on the boat. So that's the assignment and the managing of the moorings. So we do that for all the different mooring areas. And then also we have to assign boats to the slips throughout town too, and everyone gets issued a permit. So that's what we do in the off season. So people might wonder like what we're doing now. Well, everyone's renewing their permits, and we're assigning them to their mooring or to their slip, and issuing the permits and collecting the revenues. So in addition to doing budgets and all this stuff and managing some of the projects like we have in the past, dredging or the boat ramp that's taking place now, we're also doing this mooring management, getting this stuff ready so that when we get into the spring, everyone has their mooring assignments, their permit, and then they can launch their boat and they have their assignment of where they can go. Next slide, please. I provide this every year. I won't spend much time on it, but I like to just kind of provide a look back on, where we've gone with revenues. It's a combination of, obviously increases in fees, but also continued due diligence by not just myself, but my staff on going out there, inspecting every summer boats to make sure that they have their permits. If they don't, we issue warnings. Then we issue violations and pursue collection of fees. Not everyone is just willing to apply and get a permit. And if we don't keep after them, they'll be happy to not get a permit. So it does take work to collect the mooring revenues, but we are successful. You'll notice that if you look down at the fines, you'll see that some years fine issuance are much higher. This past year, fines were at the time of this creation, it was almost $6,000. So fines this past year were rather steep, and most of that was a lot was mooring fees, but there were also a fair number of I believe wake violations. We had a fair number of complaints from people for wake violations. So we're looking into that. You'll also notice that the transient revenues were much higher this year, but we'll get into that in some other slides as we look at them at the fees or the revenue this year. But I just like everyone to kind of see that the harbor is a continuous steady stream of revenue for the town. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a kind of a visual for what the revenues are. You'll notice if we look at on the chart to the right, the transient there, you'll see that there was a big spike in transient revenues this year, and that's somewhat challenging to explain. I think the real reason for that was there's been a big spike in boat sales, and there's not a lot of places for people to keep boats. So we had a lot of longer term transient mooring rentals in the inner harbor. So we collected additional revenues there. And we had some new regulations that were put into place in World's End. And I think the new regulations in World's End sparked some more mooring rentals in World's End. So I think that's that translated into some increased revenues. I don't know that this is going to be sustainable from year after year. I would anticipate that this would probably fall back down into the $12,000 or maybe somewhere between the $18,000 and $12,000. But it was interesting to see that spike. Any questions on any of these, the revenues or anything? Okay, next slide. The Harbormaster's office is continually always working on new initiatives and projects. We're working on the town wharf improvement project with the Harbor Development Committee. We've been working on the boat ramp replacement project. I think I've been working on that now for 12 years, and it's finally happening right now. It was significantly over budget because, as you know, construction and materials right now are very high, but it's actually happening, and that's great. We have a new vessel that's should be delivered very soon. It's going to be replacing the Sea Ark, our current Marine 2, which was new, I think, in 1995. So, and that vessel is being funded, 3/4 of it's being funded by the Port Security Grant. And this past fall, we were awarded another grant to rehab Marine 1, which was new back in 2010. So that'll fund 3/4 of putting new engines on that boat and replacing electronics and bringing that boat up to current standards, which it desperately needs. So we're constantly writing grants and looking for money and trying to come up with different creative things to help improve the harbor and the waterfront.
Yeah, and if I can just interrupt you for a second, Ken, for our new people on AdCom, if you're not aware of it, Ken is the grant master. The number of grants that he's been able to get for the harbor, for our boats and such things is just, it's amazing. So just want to give you that shout out.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of a breakdown of salaries and expenses. If you look at you know, our expenses, it looks like we have a lot of money for our expenses, but you know, a fair amount of that goes to fuel. We do have a fair amount of money for grounds, but it's important to note that approximately $10,000 of grounds funds goes to slip fees at the shipyard. So that leaves us about $12,000 to manage, you know, other ground expenses. We have $14,000, that's for vehicles, that's for 2 trucks and 3 boats. So that's not a huge amount of money for maintaining the vehicles and the vessels. And then online mooring, the $12,000 for professional services, that's the fee for maintaining our online renewal capability and permit management for permits. We have $9,000 for use and occupancy at the shipyard for our office space, which I anticipate will continue into the future. We're not currently included in the new public safety building, so it looks like we're going to be staying where we are. And then,
Andy, I have to jump off. I'm on a town conference call, okay? Mom's on. Everything okay? Okay.
Andy, we can hear you.
and then the utilities, that's internet expenses. So those are just some of the expenses that I like to point out because it looks like we have a lot of money, but when it's explained, I think it's quite clear what the funds are for and how they're used. Next slide. And then this just explains that additional request for the $3,000 to install and remove the new floats at the boat ramp. And that's all I have from my presentation on the budget. If there's any questions.
Bob?
Ken, thanks for your presentation. Just by way of confirmation, was the increase in your salary due to the wage and classification study?
That's correct.
Well, it's well deserved.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Ken? And I would echo Dave Lean's comments that you are the grant master. That it's really it's not unnoticed how you managed to get some good dollars coming into the town. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions for Ken or questions for Dave Lean about the budget? So Ken, as you probably heard over the years, the additional request, we won't vote on that tonight. We'll get to that later, near closer to the end of the budget process. So tonight we'll just vote on the base budget request.
Understood.
So Daveline, do you have a recommendation for us?
Yes, so for the Harbormaster budget, I recommend salaries in the amount of $226,529. And for expenses in the amount of $81,351 for a total Harbormaster budget of $307,880.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
Ken, we get to keep you on for a little while longer if you would like to be here for our next order of business, which is the hearing of Article M, which is the Waterways Fund.
So that's
I'll
why,
stick around for that.
Okay, thanks.
and I think I can go over this fairly quickly. It's basically the same as last year, only updating the fiscal years. And the amounts, the projected amounts are the same. The Waterways Fund is derived from a state statute allowing the establishment of a Waterways Fund, which Hingham took advantage in the 2019 annual town meeting. We're dealing with transfers that are basically going to happen with respect to revenues that are generated in this fiscal year, FY22. And it's because we don't know what the actual numbers are going to be as of the close of the books on June 30th, that we are projecting expenses. And those expenses are basically, or projecting revenues. 50% of the boat excise revenues by state law go into the Waterways Fund to begin with. So we're voting to put the remaining amount of the boat excise taxes into the Waterways Fund. We're voting to put approximately $40,000 from any parking license fee for the purpose of accessing slips or moorings. And we're voting to put approximately $10,000 in mooring, docking, and permit late fees into the Waterways Fund. The recommendation this year is basically exactly the same as last year, except that I added the words "the remaining" in front of 50% of the boat excise taxes to reflect the fact that this is the excess over the 50% that is already going into the Waterways Fund. Sue has reported to me that the Waterways Fund presently, or had a balance as of the December 31st, 21 of $1,054,614.19.
Can you say that again, Bob, please?
$1,054,614.19. And I actually would appreciate the advice of my colleagues here as to whether it would be a good idea to put that amount into the comment and to update that on an annual basis so that our citizens would know about the accumulation of this fund, which is ultimately intended to be used, I think, to offset future dredging expense, which can be substantial. So I'll stop my comments there and let Ken amplify anything that I may have omitted to say.
No, I think everything you said is spot on. It's definitely one thing that it's geared towards is definitely to offset dredging. The fund is also used to support capital expenses for the Harbormaster's office. And it might also be used from time to time to support other endeavors of the selectmen that they might choose to use for other waterfront activities. Those were the three, really the three things that were tasked with when we set out in 2019 to do this funding on an annual basis. Those were really the three areas that, you know, we really want to focus this money for when it's needed.
Ken, can you tell us about when we recently dredged the harbor, how much that cost, and then when you expect the harbor to be needing dredging again?
So we dredge it, dredge the harbor every 10 years. And it was about $2 million to dredge the harbor this last cycle. I don't remember the exact number, and I wasn't prepared to give that to you. I mean, if you remember, Sue, please feel free to chime in, but it was about $2 million, a little bit more than that. But we had a really, I want to be careful about putting that number out. We had a really good, we got a really good price on that because Cashman was in Quincy. They had a dredge sitting around. It was doing nothing. It was a large dredge, and it was able to come in here quickly and it basically dredged the harbor in like 1 month. So, you know, we were anticipating that dredging might cost $3.5 million. So it was a delightful bid to get and a good cost. So that's what it was this time. When we get to the next time, who knows what it'll be? Maybe we'll luck out with another really great bid.
Did it happen in 2020?
It was
The last time
like, it was 2019, I believe it was.
I remember seeing it in the harbor, but my memory is pandemic fuzzy about.
Yeah, it
exactly.
was, so we dredged like every 10 years. I think it was 2009,
Yeah.
20, and then it was 2019, the winter of 2018, 2019, something like that.
Okay, thank you. Daveline? Oh, you're on mute.
There you go. I wanted to just highlight the importance of this money for capital projects as well, because when Ken comes before capital outlay, it's pretty easy to deal with his requests because there's a source of funding for the things that he needs. And with boats and such, I mean, there's always going to be a need. So this Waterways Fund is really an important way to further the work that's being done by that department. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why I felt it was important to mention that too. But we try, as you know, we work very hard to make sure we get grant funds to supplement our request.
Andy?
Where is this money now?
It's, I believe, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's in the general fund. This is not a stabilization fund. Stabilization funds are governed by a different section of the general laws. And in preparing for the presentation of this article, I asked Sue about whether this fund was generating revenue, which was also enhancing the Waterways Fund. And the answer is that it is not, because there is not a state statute authorizing this to generate revenue. So to the extent that it's in the general fund and is being invested by our extremely competent town treasurer, it is generating revenue overall for the town. Anything you want to add, Sue?
No, it's a special revenue fund, Andy. And all the mooring permits basically go into the general fund, and every month we transfer it over to the waterways. The boat excise tax, the other 50%, that all goes at the end of the year once we know exactly how much money has been collected.
Is there any advantage to making this vote effective on July 1st or June 30, so as to keep the money in the general fund earning some interest? And I asked that both with regard to what Article M proposes to do, but also with regard to what you just said, which is the monthly transfers, if I understand, from the general fund to the Waterways Improvement and Maintenance Fund. Doesn't it make more sense to keep the money in a income generating account as long as it can be kept there?
Well, when we say transfer, it's basically journal entries. It stays in the general fund. I mean, the interest is calculated on that money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I should have known better.
Sue's always ready to tell you the good info, so.
So tell me
Does
what?
anyone else? The good information.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And what do
Anyone
people
else
think
have any
about,
questions?
what do people think about including the balance in the Waterways Fund in the comment?
If you add in the cost of the dredging, I think it's a good idea. If you don't add in the cost of the dredging, I'm afraid people are just gonna look at that as another rainy day fund being untapped.
Yeah, I'd be happy to say, and the comment kind of says it's already, that it's only going to partially offset the cost of the dredging. It's not going to fully offset it.
Dave,
I mean, the dredging is, what would you say, Ken? $6 to $10 million?
No, I don't think it'll be, well, it's hard to tell what it'll be in, in, I guess, what is that now, like 8 years, but I don't anticipate it would be that much. We've been anticipating that it's gonna be like 3.5 million this past cycle, and we were able to come in at 2, so maybe if we anticipate that it's 4, maybe we'll be coming in underneath that. But I'm still speculating. I'm not an engineer really qualified to to project that far.
And I don't want to jump in, Dave Lee, but aren't some of those dredging costs offset by state funds as well?
If we get grant funds, then they're offset. Yes, and the last 2 dredging cycles we've been able to secure grant funds, and I would be optimistic that we would be able to secure grant funds.
Yeah. I was just going to respond, Bob, to your question. I think putting the amount in is almost too much information, because then people wonder why we're not doing X, Y, or Z. I think having, as I noticed it was last year, what the fund is used for is sufficient, because that really tells people how the money can be used.
Well, good. I'll leave it the way it is then.
I mean, that's just my thought.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree, because it's also, there's broad, it's not just for dredging, it's for other repairs to the harbor area as necessary and improvement. Does anyone have anything else to add or ask a question? Andy, you're all set. Okay. Okay. Bob, do you feel like we're ready to take a vote on this article?
Yes, so I would move that we recommend that the town vote to transfer the sums specified in the recommended motion that I previously circulated this week, which remains unchanged, into the town's municipal waterways improvement and maintenance fund.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, going through the roll. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina.
Aye.
Caitlin stepped out for a minute to go to the select board meeting. She'll be back And Sarah's not here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
10-0, that's what I have.
Okay, great.
And Julie, as we
Thanks,
finish
Bob.
all of
Yeah.
this, I just want to thank the public safety team in general. I know we did finish that budget a moment ago, but with fire and police and the Harbormaster and animal control, it's a big amount of budgets. And so I want to just thank Tina and Nancy and Sarah for all their work.
And
Should have done that before.
I should have asked this question before, but has the select board already voted this?
Yes. They have.
So they were unanimous as well.
Yes. I know.
Sure.
Thanks. I'll send the article on to our editors.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken.
You're very welcome.
All right, so next up, we just have the group of articles that we heard last week, but we did not vote. And now we can vote them tonight. And so the first two articles, Article A and B, they're Matt Goulet's article, but Matt was unable to attend our meeting tonight. But I'll just read them for him, if that's okay with everybody, or not read them, but it's the first one is Article A, the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund / Trustees of the Bathing Beach. And I did send just a little while ago before a meeting, so I apologize, but Matt had updated the comment for those two articles for the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund based on the edits that we gave him last week. So if anyone has any further questions or discussion.
You're gonna take the periods out in the comment at the beginning of the quote and add a fourth one at the end of the quote, I assume.
Well, it'll go to Tina for editing.
Okay,
Tina has perked up. She's listening. She's heard what you said.
I will. I compared, I don't have Article A open right now, but I literally compared it to the 2012 and 2016 articles because it did look a little funky and it was exact. So I will recompare it and check that.
well, it's wrong. It's a matter of Shrunken White's usage, that's all.
Okay. Well,
I
I
last
will.
year. Well, Tina will take care of it. Just
I
look
will.
at-
I'm on it.
Look at last year. We'll make it. She'll make it look good.
I will indeed.
Okay, so the recommended motion is that Laura Boyle, 22 Westmoreland Road, be elected a member of the committee to have the charge of the income of the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund for the term of 3 years. And 2, that Adrian Ramsey, 55 North Street, be elected as trustee of the Bathing Beach in accordance with Chapter 75 of Massachusetts Acts of 1934. Can I get a second?
Second,
Any other discussion? Okay, time to vote. Bob,
aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Andy,
Aye,
Eveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
and Caitlin's not back, right? Okay, so again, Nancy, 10-0. Okay, next we have Article B, which is assume liability for the DCR. Does anyone have any further questions about that article? So the recommendation is as stated in the Article B.
what was the change, the last minute change?
Article B was not a last minute change.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any notes on any changes to that article. Does anyone else?
Well, that was one of the ones you circulated shortly before the meeting, Julie, that said it was revised. So it was not revised?
Well, Hannah Lincoln Whiting was revised. Hold on. But let's see. I don't have any, I don't see any changes.
Okay.
He had revised the Hannah Lincoln comment, and then he sent those two comments to Tina for editing. So can I get a vote on the recommended motion?
So moved.
Second,
Good.
All in favor? Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Dave Moline,
aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to Article C. Sarah's going to join us any minute. I'm going to wait until Sarah can join us in the meeting because she's going to explain how the changes to Article C. Because that article did change. All right, next we have Article H, disbursement of electric light department receipts. Does anyone remember who had that article?
Either Sarah or Caitlin. I can't remember who.
Caitlin had it.
Okay.
Caitlin had it, Julie.
Okay. We didn't make any changes to that comment last week when we heard the article. Does anyone have any questions or comments? So can I get a vote on Article H, the recommended motion, as stated in the article?
Second, the recommended motion.
Second.
All in favor? Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Dave Moline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Okay. The next is Article I, the Building Department Revolving Fund.
That's me.
Oh, thank God. Okay, so you want to give your recommended motion?
Yeah, there are no changes from when we reviewed this before. So I recommend that the town limit the total amount that may be spent from the building department revolving fund for fiscal year 2023 to $350,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Dave Moline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
All right, thank you, Tina. Okay, now we have Article L, which is the acceptance of easements, which I think was Sarah's article. We did not have any changes to this article. The recommendation is that the town authorize but not require for a period through the end of fiscal year 2023, that the select board to accept grants of easements for purposes of streets, sidewalks, or pedestrian walkways, or water, drainage, sewage, or utility facilities on terms or conditions that the board deems in the best interest of the town. Can I get a second?
Second,
Any other discussion? Okay, Bob,
aye.
George,
Aye.
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Caitlin.
Aye.
All right.
Me, aye.
Oh, Tina,
I was
sorry.
gonna say,
skipped over. I
It should have been
apologize.
11.
Yes, it's 11. Thank you. Okay, and then we have, so that's it of the perennials that we went through last week, except I'm just waiting until Sarah can join us so she can take us through the changes to Article C. And so we're gonna go now to Brenda with Article J. We're gonna hear this and vote on it tonight.
So this is another perennial, sorry, I didn't print it out. The Elder Services Revolving Fund is the fund into which all of the fees and charges that individuals pay for the services at the senior center are collected, and then the expenses involved in providing those services are paid out of. At this point, the amount coming in and going out each year is about $80,000, and that is why the authorization is for $80,000. Each year, that leaves somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 holding the account open. I believe the current balance is 7,000 something. So the
Okay.
recommended motion is that the town limit the total amount that may be spent from the Elder Services Revolving Fund for fiscal year 2023 to $80,000.
Is there any discussion? Any questions for Brenda?
Second the motion,
Okay. And we vote, Bob,
aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Andy,
Abstain.
okay. Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Caitlin.
Aye.
So we have 10 in favor or 1 abstention.
10-0-1.
Okay. So I'm going to skip to the liaison update, and then we'll just wait for Sarah to join us. So Dave, do you want to just update us on your meeting tonight?
Sure. We had the first ACES meeting tonight and basically just covered some questions that the ACES group had submitted to the school committee. The questions related to, well, the questions we discussed tonight were largely related to fees that are collected in the school department and what the plan is for either maintaining or increasing or revisiting the fees, philosophy related to the fees themselves and what percent of the expenses they should cover, et cetera. So nothing reaching a conclusion. We will have more to discuss. I do have good news to report, though, that next Monday, for anybody who's interested, there will be what's referred to, I think, on the agenda of the school committee as a student progress report, which is an analogous report to Dr. Jamie Labillois' presentation about student achievement last year. So this is the roll forward a year later snapshot of student achievement thus far this school year. So I think it'll be interesting. I can certainly report back to you all what we hear, but if anyone has nothing better to do than a Zoom next Monday, that will be part of the school committee agenda. And next Monday is also the school committee public hearing on their budget, which is, I think provides also important insights just for all of us to think about how the public is looking at the school budget proposal and what they'll learn from input from citizens next week. So that's on the agenda. I think that's a Monday, 7 o'clock start.
Okay. And then advisory committee will hear the school budget presentation with the select board and the school committee next Tuesday in a joint meeting starting at 7 p.m. And then we go to our regular meeting after that. Okay, so next on the
Okay.
agenda, we have,
Can I ask, and maybe it's jumping ahead to Article X, which George circulated, I believe, which is the $864,000 for resurfacing the tennis courts at the high school.
And Andy, that's not on tonight's agenda.
No, I know. I was just going to ask Dave. I realize that
Oh, okay.
whether there's been any discussion of that at the school budget meetings. I mean, I guess I'm surprised it's a separate article. I guess I don't understand why that's not in the school budget.
Fair question. It has not come up at the school budget hearings. I think my memory may be fuzzy, but I think the warrant articles may actually be on the school committee's agenda next Monday. So, if you're interested, that would be a night to hear that. I don't believe I've heard any school committee discussions of the warrant articles other than the general one of supporting putting them forward. So no, I don't think it's happened yet, as far as I know.
it's
Okay.
not on our agenda for tonight, so we will get to hear more about it next week. We're going to schedule that warrant article hearing tentatively for next Thursday. The select board is planning to hear it next Tuesday. So we'll find out more. Anyone else have any questions for Dave about ACEs and the school budget? Okay. So next we had on our agenda for tonight, the 5-year forecast update, and we have a newly updated forecast, which I did email out to you today. The forecast group met earlier today to review it. And although the review of this document was scheduled for our agenda tonight, instead we are going to change it to reviewing it with the select board and the school committee at our joint meeting next Tuesday. So since we're going to be all together to hear the school budget, we're going to also hear the newly updated forecast and go through that, and people can ask questions about the forecast then. So next on our agenda, we have discussion of the Sustainable Budget Task Force and the FY23 budget. So as you know, on Tuesday of this week, the Sustainable Budget Task Force unveiled its final report, which we attended to hear it. The materials were posted to the town's website yesterday, which includes the final report, the slides for the presentation that we attended the other night, and the financial planning modeling tool. I sent you the link last night, but you can also just go straight to the town website. The link is on the select board's page. And I believe that they're putting together a press release to be able to let more people around town know about these documents on the town's website. So the final report is 128 pages, but it's fantastic in its breadth of information. So I highly recommend that all AdCom members run through and read through that report. The sooner the better. The material should all be themes and information that's familiar to AdCom members, but so it shouldn't be too difficult to digest, but it's very powerful to have all that information together in one place. It's really an impressive document. So I highly encourage you to open that up and take a look through it.
Any chance that we could persuade our crack administrative staff to make hard copies that can be picked up tomorrow morning?
It's 128 pages, Andy. I'm not sure about that.
It's really
but-
easy to read online. I read it this afternoon. You can make it big print and everything. Well, no, I meant for me, I made it big print. I don't mean that for anybody else.
I make it big print too.
Yeah. Just-
So we are jumping ahead in our, our meeting is kind of going quickly. So I was going to have Michelle Monspier join us to answer some questions if we had any about about that final report from the task force, but we could have a discussion anyway to go through how we feel about the information, if we have any questions. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things first, though, before we had a discussion. In the final report, the task force recommends that the town consider closing the FY23 budget deficit by using remaining Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds from the stabilization fund if possible, and a modest amount of excess unassigned fund balance. The task force further recommends that the town consider proposing a potential override in FY24 or gross services. And we also saw in the presentation slides that they had hypothetical scenarios, A, B, C, D. And I want to stress that these are hypothetical scenarios. And although the numbers came from somewhere, they weren't just picked randomly out of the sky. They are hypothetical, and it's not like we're considering right now these exact numbers that were in those slides. So, I mean, for me, it was easy to jump on looking at those specific numbers the other night and say, oh my gosh, look at these numbers. And I just want to stress that they're all hypothetical, and those percentages or the amount of fund balance that would be used and all that, they were just scenarios that they wanted to take us through. So I've spoken to the select board chair, Joe Fisher, and he says that all options for FY23 and then beyond are on the table, and he intends to discuss it in the select board meetings, but also we have an opportunity as advisory committee to have discussions, and I'll have discussions with the select board in the coming weeks. So I figured tonight if we can just go around and raise hands if you want to give any impressions or ask any questions, we can just go around if anyone wants to talk about it. I know that not everyone has had the chance to read through the report, so we don't have to talk about it tonight if we don't feel like it, but this is an opportunity to talk about it. Tina?
I'll go. It was an awesome presentation, and the amount of information they put together and how incredibly clear it was, how well it was delivered. I just couldn't have been more impressed. But I want to talk openly about having an override this year. I really think that we're doing a disservice by not really exploring that option and just saying, well, we don't want to do it, so we're going to hold it off till next year. And here's the reasons. I think we should approach it like, what if we did it this year? What if we tried to do it? What would that look like? I have a lot of reasons that I feel that way. I think that we should right size our budget. I think the budget we're proposing is not sustainable. I think right now we have overwhelming support from both the municipal and the educational side towards an override. And I'm really concerned about morale. If we start looking at a $5.5 or $7.8 million override, and we have to, I think we have to provide notices, because don't we have to show a balanced budget for town meeting? If you do an override, you have to show a balanced budget. So I am under the impression that you have to I, I'm not sure if it's the collective bargaining agreements for the town. And I think it is for the school from the override we did in 2013. You have to notify people if their job is at risk. And if we have to do that for a $7.8 million hole, I just wonder what morale is going to look like in town. So I just think we need to have this conversation and not assume it's not going to happen.
Okay, thanks, Tina. Nancy?
Thanks. I would like to, first of all, echo Tina's words regarding the quality of the report. Unfortunately, I have not read the entire thing. I am probably about a third of the way through it, so I haven't absorbed all the details. So this is based primarily on my reaction from the presentation last night. And I would say that there were 3 scenarios that were put forward, and I like your words, Julie, that that these were hypothetical. But I think by not including a scenario that included an override, it made it appear that there was a bias against an override, and that it shouldn't even be on the table. I believe that we went to town meeting last year and said we were doing a one-time use of funds in order to plug a hole, and that we were going to have a solution. And my assumption at that time, and I don't mean to speak for anyone else on the committee, but my assumption at that time was that that we were going to plug it with the use of appropriate recurring revenue, and not plug it again with fund balance. And so I'm really uncomfortable with the idea that we would do that 2 years in a row. And I'm particularly uncomfortable with it because 80% of that budget is personnel. And the personnel board went through a very heavy lift this year of right-sizing people's incomes. And that is, if we, to understand the master plan and all the comments that came from our citizens, that affordable housing is an important thing that the town is looking for. And right-sizing incomes of our employees goes, in my mind, is very much a part of that picture of how we make the town affordable so that people who work here can live here. And the quality of our personnel and what they do for us as a community can't be overstated. I think this board is particularly, this committee is particularly privy to see that every year when we review the budgets of all the individual departments. So I think it makes zero sense to me that we would put forward the salary increases that are built into these budgets that we have put forward with collective bargaining agreements. We can't back down from them. We shouldn't back down from them. And so I don't see any reason that we don't go to the town this year and say we need an override simply to stay equitable and to pay our town employees the correct amount. I just think it's time to go to the town and let the town vote it. And I think that we should have a serious conversation of a scenario D that includes that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. George?
Thanks, Julie. I wish we had started the task force, right after town meeting last year. We'd be much farther down the road, and we certainly might be considering an override for this year instead of in '24. But as you all know, and along with Dave and Kristen, sat in and listened to a lot of these meetings. And one of the things that became obvious very quickly in the process was that, we as a town have lived somewhat of a charmed life, and I'm not sure that we all realize that. But we've had significant large-scale growth in this town over the last number of years, and that growth was contributing about 1.5% to our revenue line on an annual basis. So if you take basic 2.5%, 2.5, and then you add 1.5, now you're dealing with 4% income, and that's a pretty decent amount of money. But unfortunately, that period of growth is now ended, and we're having to face some financial reality. As I think it was Tom who said last night, there is no magic bullet to this. There are a number of options, many of which will require further study. But in the short term, there isn't a significant amount of revenue that is going to come into the town, which makes the idea of an override, all the more important. And my final comment would be that I think the financial model that John Asher has developed and is out there on the select board website is fantastic in that it allows you to put different numbers in there, but it also shows you that a one-time override is not a cure for the indeterminate future. That expenses continue to grow and they continue to outpace revenue in many cases. And so the prospect of this town having to deal with multiple overrides when we don't have a history of it is really going to be an interesting challenge. So that's all I have.
Thanks, George. Daveline?
Oh, I just wanted to comment. I did read the report this afternoon, and part of what I keep struggling with, I have no doubt there will be a need for an override at some point, but I'm really troubled by this $12 million in excess unassigned fund balance that we haven't figured out how we're using that, and to not figure out how we're going to use that. If it's just going to sit there and we're going to raise taxes on people or with an override in a town where, I mean, one of the most amazing things I heard last night was the number of people in this town who make under $75,000 a year. And so there was a lot of discussion about the higher end. But an override is a burden for certain of our citizens. And so in sort of thinking about that, with that $12 million, how are we going to use that? And that would really influence what I think about an override at this point in time. So I think, you have to show that that's the budget. Like I've noticed, well, I won't say any more at that, but I think we have to think about that excess capacity. And we also need to think about what the federal dollars are going to be that we're still learning. So I'm not opposed to an override. We talked about this earlier in our season. But I think we have to think about that, somehow to have an override and still have $12 million that is above our financial policy sitting there. There's something about that doesn't ring right to me. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Daleen. I mean, I would note that we all know that it's not wise to put that money towards operating budget because it's just digs the hole that you have to fill the next year and the next year after that. And it's true, the town should be putting that money towards capital projects, one-time money, defraying, tax increases or, blunting tax increases for the large capital projects that are coming up, like Foster and the public safety facility.
And it's
So,
hard to do that before we know what the cost of those, like, I realize that could go to part of excluding the debt. I mean, that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to know that when
Or-
we don't yet have that number.
Exactly. But there, you know, we also, as we get further into the warrant article process, that we're going to see that there's going to be dollars of unassigned fund balance are going to go to a number of warrant articles that will go to town meeting. So that's going to eat into that,
Right.
that amount pretty quickly as well. So, but you're right. I mean, it's.
I want to
just let
eat
sit
into
there.
it.
You have to
I
use
guess
it. Well, you should use it, but use it. Yeah. Thank you, Daveline. Al?
Hi, my 2 cents, it would be quick. One, agreeing, Nancy, you can't speak for me. I was very much grumpily voted last year on the one-time revenue filling the hole, and with the expectation that we'd be putting A, be direct with the town about what we were doing, and B, that we would put before the town this year, whether that should continue. The new thought, I guess, or the additional thought, is that in listening to the budget proposals, I have very serious reservations of supporting budgets with any new positions. I don't want to make an overly dramatic statement, but I just, after all the hiring we did last year and to dig that hole, I would, and with the recommendations very clearly stated in the, yes, very comprehensive and well done report, very clearly states, stop digging. And I've heard a lot of continued digging or requiring shovels. And I'd have a very hard time supporting that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Bob?
Thanks, Julie. It was an impressive presentation last night. I think all of us involved in town government have a daunting task in front of us. I'm willing to be, kind of reserve judgment until we have a better understanding of the 5-year forecast as it goes on. I mean, right now it's showing, 1.8 million in fund balance on federal funds. And that's a number that might actually go down. But I'd like to talk about mechanics for a moment. First of all, in terms of our role, we can certainly express our advice as an advisory committee to the select board, but it's the select board that needs to decide upon an override or not. We don't get to make that decision. And if an override proposal is to be presented to the town, then the select board and town administration and then this committee would essentially have to balance the budget and identify where cuts were going to be made. We probably have some ability to do that with respect to the municipal departments. And because the schools basically get to spend whatever given to them, what would happen on the school side would be up to the school committee and school administration. And the budget process this year, so far, I think we've recommended the full amount of every budget. I think we are the ones that make the recommended motion on Article 6 in terms of a balanced budget, so that in some respect, if there were to be an override this year, we'd have to go back and look at all the budgets and probably revote them at lower numbers.
We didn't vote
We
them
didn't
yet,
vote
though.
them. We just did recommendations. Yeah, we didn't do any votes. So, but at some point, we'd have to have a process that would give us lower numbers on basically every single budget in order to get to a recommended balanced budget for Article 6. I think for the multiple reasons that were expressed by the Sustainable Budget Task Force the other night, that we just can't do an override correctly between now and the end of April. And I think next year, George, when Julie and I are spectators, I think the advisory committee and the select board and the town administration, Tom Mayo, I know you're out there somewhere. We need your budget recommendations early next year. The budget process at our level, the town administration level, and the select board all needs to contemplate that there's going to be a budget delivered that would necessarily involve service cuts in the absence of an override. And I think the town needs to go through that maybe 9 months of detailed discussion of just what we're talking about with each budget and what it means in terms of police vehicles or fire personnel or educators that a balanced budget will not support without an override. I would also note that, I mean, at the end of last year, I was hoping we'd be in a position to do an override this year, but I just do not see that we are there. And even if we were to do an override this year, just looking at the numbers, we'd be doing an override next year. I mean, as Andy and Tina and Evan said the other night, you know, overrides may be coming our way on a more frequent basis. And that needs to be part of the discussion as well. So I think we need to approach this in greater detail and more thoughtfully over the course of a lengthy budget cycle next year in order to get it right before we go to town meeting. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Bob. Andy?
Thank you. Scenario B projects using 2.8 million in excess unassigned funds in
Which
23.
is a
And then,
hypothetical scenario.
of course, and then a $5.5 million override in fiscal 24, which would just about balance the budget, $300,000 short, but presumably that still leaves in the neighborhood of $9 million in unassigned fund balance. And let me just sort of say parenthetically, with regard to unassigned fund balance, it makes perfect sense to me that you can't continue to expect to pay annual operating costs out of fund balance. So that, as I said, that makes perfect sense on the one hand. On the other hand, it isn't fund balance primarily an accumulation of unexpended operating budget amounts? Sue?
No, it is not.
What is it?
Fund balance is revenues minus expenses. Part of it is turnbacks, but a good portion of it is, you know, one-time revenue that we get, and, you know, forecasted revenue. We receive more revenue than we have forecasted. That's what fund balance is. And then you take out what we reserve, and what's left is unassigned.
How much is turned back on average?
Turnbacks, like we've always said, is about 1% of our total budget. So we
So-
budget at 99% accuracy.
Okay, so if the total budget is 140, what's that, 1.4 million?
Well, you can't really say, you have to take out, Ware River and Country Club and sewer, because those aren't general funds.
So it's less than 1.4 million.
Yeah, it's about $1 million.
Okay, all right. Well, that moots one of my points, I
that
guess.
doesn't- And
Although
that
not
doesn't
in,
mean it doesn't mean that goes into unassigned fund balance either.
right. I guess, I don't think it moots my point entirely, but the real problem I wrestle with is the black hole aspect of the fund balance, and that the capital improvements that we talk about with bonding are so large that, expenditures from fund balance are not going to make a significant impact in certainly the new school or those kind, the new public safety facility, those kind of things. But so we're talking about relatively, in the grand scheme of things, relatively small amounts. And I wonder if there's a way that we can look at fund balance more closely to predict what amount of fund balance could reasonably be expected to go in each year and come out each year. In other words, maybe there's a percentage of fund balance that can be used to pay operating expenses. I pose the question, having no idea what the answer is, but if some significant portion of this comes from, well, the 1 million is not all that significant in the face of 12 million, but $1 million a year, and then some other comes in because we have understated revenues, and the revenues are annual numbers. That sort of suggests to me there ought to be a number that predictably comes in each year, that if we spent each year on operating expenses would be okay. In other words, just an additional revenue source, as an unassigned fund balance of some percentage would be viewed as an additional revenue source. So so I guess I'm sort of with Dave Aline on that, saying, boy, there's a lot of money sitting around, and then going out to ask people to say you're broke and you can't balance your budget, but you have all this money in your savings account, so that's one thought. I think I had three thoughts. That was the first one. I mean, I'd love to be able to get a better sense of how to use. There must be some way to use fund balance. The second thought I had is that as I think I mentioned, is that the amounts of the overrides are significant. Scenario B there's a 5.5 million override in 24. Scenario C is a 7.8 million override in fiscal 24. Those are pretty large numbers. I don't know. I don't know if Tina's probably right that we should ideally ask for an override this year, but I tend to think that Bob is right that we don't have time to do it. And if you want to do it in a manner in which you're going to be successful, and or not, probably not do it at all, notwithstanding how large the overrides that would be requested next year are. The third thing I wanted to mention, what really, among many things, I haven't read the report because it will kill me, but nobody seems to care, to read over 100 pages on my laptop. But the
Andy,
large
I can print you
letters, pardon?
I can print you a copy.
Thank you, Michelle. I asked for that previously and they
Andy
told me
asked for it
couldn't
earlier
be-
and
couldn't be done.
And
we're
it's
showing
10
him the
cents a page.
sympathy, Michelle, but you're
I'll pay,
nicer.
I'll
Michelle.
happy to pay 10 cents a page. But the slide 6 in the presentation the other night, was it 6? Or maybe it was before that. It was entitled Expenditures Police Examples. And yeah. And it shows that in 1980, we had 57 patrol officers who answered 12,400 calls. 20 years later, in 2000, we had 47 patrol officers who answered 13,500 calls. And in 2021, we have 49 officers who answered 30,000 calls. That, to me, unless technology has multiplied the effectiveness of any single patrol officer multiple times, that one slide suggests to me that the budget is in serious need of right sizing, that it's not, this is not realistic to think that we're doing, the police are able to do what they would like to do with the manpower that we give them. I guess I've said enough for now, with no helpful solutions, I concede.
Thanks, Andy. Michelle, do you want to jump in and say anything about, perhaps capturing better the unassigned fund balance, to Andy's first point?
What was Andy's first point? I only have one brain cell left by this point in the week. I'm sorry.
My question is there a way to manage, the fund balance has some predictable revenue each year, $1 million in turnback, and presumably the other sources can be be projected with some relative accuracy. Past performance is no guarantee of future results, but the question is there a way to look at fund balance as an additional revenue source, a small percentage of fund balance as an additional revenue source, say in the order of $2 million a year?
Andy, that goes against the financial policy that you guys all just voted on.
I agree wholeheartedly, but I mean, as I have voted on it, and as I said, it makes perfect sense to me that you can't forever use reserve funds to fund an operating budget. But that was based on the premise that these are sort of fixed reserve funds, and it's a diminishing fund. So as soon as you spend it, it's not going to be refreshed. But if in fact it is refreshed to some amount every year, then maybe the promise of not using it, or the intent not to use it for operating funds, is misplaced. That only makes sense if the fund you're taking the money out of is not going to be refreshed, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's my point. Is there some percentage of the unassigned fund balance that predictably is replaced each year, such that that can be used to help support operating expenditures?
I think the task force, we talked about that a bit, but we stopped short of making that a recommendation. I think we talked much more about using unassigned fund balance to support capital needs. And I think Dave, Aline, and Matt know from their time on capital outlay that there's a lot of medium capital requests that just don't fit anywhere. There's much smaller capital items that we can usually kind of make work with the capital outlay allocation. And then of course, there are these big projects before the town that will be debt exclusions, but there's roof repairs and fire engines and a lot of school building projects and other things that are sort of in the $100,000, $200,000 to $1 million range. And that's what the towns have sort of taken up on an ad hoc basis through the warrant process. But we talked about targeting some unassigned fund balance to the extent that excess above the 20% was available on a more regular basis or planned basis to addressing some of those needs. That's what, as one way of augmenting the capital outlay budget without, in itself needing an override just to put $1 million or $2 million more into capital outlay. I think when we looked at it, the 22 capital outlay budget was under the 3% threshold recommended in the financial policy. And that was just one thing we talked about being a structural deficit and being very frustrating for departments across the organization and for the capital outlay committee to not really be able to address stuff in a timely manner. So I think we felt like that was a more appropriate use of unassigned fund balance that way.
I would certainly, I don't mean to argue, but that's certainly an appropriate use of some of the unassigned fund balance. And certainly the chair of the capital outlay committee made the point last night that they are consistently underfunded in their view. But the reality is that has not been done. And it's not that the capital outlay needs have suddenly popped up or that the unassigned fund balance has suddenly popped up. Both of those realities have been there and nothing has been done to meld them.
Andy, I would suggest looking though at Article T this year, which is the fire department's large capital needs. And I assume those will end up being funded out of fund balance. I don't know that, but it would seem to me. And that's for a new fire engine and roof repairs and building repairs and a whole bunch of things that capital outlay, it would more than exhaust our entire budget. So I think that there is a movement towards looking at fund balance to fund those kinds of things. So that gets at that 12 million in my head.
Where do we hear about that? I mean, how do we know?
Well, if you read Article T, and we'll at some point it will be on our agenda to fund those.
Yeah, we're gonna hear that article.
And it's
We'll hear that article and we're gonna go through that.
What does it say about fund balance?
I believe the money's going to come from fund balance to buy those capital projects or to buy a new fire engine. That will be the recommendation, new fire engine to repair the roofs and do some building on fire stations 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to the tune of about $1.5 million, as I recall off the top of my head.
Okay, so in helpful but insignificant dent in fund balance, right?
And a huge dent in the capital outlay, leaving money for other things. Sorry
Okay.
to jump in, but I just
No,
thought
that's good. Thank you for
No,
jumping
thank
in
you.
about that. And as I said earlier, there are a number of warrant articles that we are going to be hearing in the coming weeks that would possibly be using unassigned fund balance to pay for those items. So stay tuned. We're going to go next to Dave.
Thanks, Julie. I'll just reiterate quickly what to me was exactly the same reaction I had as George's, which is the notion that the 1.5% of growth that we've had over the last, well, as long as I've been on AdCom, frankly, and a little bit longer, I think has masked the fact that we're running at Prop 2.5 and yet making ends meet. And we're doing so on the back of new growth. And as a taxpayer, I think it's easy to confuse that with thinking that the current tax structure is adequate to meet our needs. And I think that there are obviously the powers that be with their ear to the ground are telling us that the growth in the future, as it's laid out in the report, is not as predictable and certainly not as significant in our crystal ball, as cloudy as it may be. So, I think that's an education component for the town in terms of helping people understand that. I think that's why this report is so fabulous and well done and well written and clear and easy to understand, no matter what your background is coming after it. So, as we talked a little bit about in the task force, or as I listened and interjected, overrides as are a part of Prop 2.5. They're a feature of Prop 2.5, not a bug. They're designed to give you the mechanism to add revenue when you need to, but only if you get the town's blessing with a majority vote. And that's, so I think it's been said a number of times, and I think it bears repeating that that making override not a bad word is an important also, I think, an educational component here. The one thing I want to add too, I'm super sympathetic to the view that we told town meeting we would do a certain thing last year, and you know, there's a discussion about whether we do that this year with the override or next year. And you know, it's a worthy conversation. For those who haven't read the report, I do think it's worth, you know, letting the recommendation of the task force in terms of the basis for their recommending a deferral till 24 to percolate a little bit. You may not ultimately agree with them, but I think they lay out some pretty compelling reasons why that's, at least in their mind, was the strategy that they lean towards. The second thing I would point out, which I read in the report, and I think just I would like to see more information on, maybe there is more, maybe it needs more work, is the question of how do we try to mitigate, you know, let's assume that an override is the solution. And I don't hear anybody advocating for cutting to fit into the, you know, into the current revenue picture, even though I don't want to discourage someone from advocating that. But if we assume for the moment that an override is an option, how do we, number one, what really is the magnitude of the burden on this town? And we're looking at some very gross in the sense of kind of macro views of average per capita income, household income. I'm very curious and kind of digging a little bit deeper, as Dave Wayne said, if you look at some kind of distribution of incomes, you know, what is the burden today on people on certain of that continuum, and what would the burden be in the future? And are there mechanisms, for example, as this report points out, something I'd never thought of or heard of, called the Tax Deferral Program, which says eligible homeowners over age 65 can defer 100% of annual property taxes, and they accrue interest at 1% a year, and it's a lien on the property. And when the property is sold, taxes get paid off first, and off we go. You know, how much of that program is being used today? How much could be available for that segment of the population if the override was to come through? I mean, to me, all these questions came up reading this report about trying to really understand the magnitude of this impact. I mean, John's graphs do a great job of showing it's a big impact. It's, you know, we're talking about double-digit % change in tax rate in 1 year, and, you know, and then another high single-digit change in a subsequent year with capital projects included. So I don't think anyone disputes it's a big number. And I just would personally think there's more work to be done to really help look people in the eye, no matter what their background or means, to help them understand how this figures into their equation. Because I will just say that the flip side of a rushed, rush is it has a pejorative context. The flip side of a failed override is a reduction in force, right? There is no mechanism that allows us to do what we're doing today in the face of a failed override. So when I think about the consequences of a 1 year deferral of an override versus the consequences of a failed override, you know, the balance of the equities to me there says, man, I might wait and just make sure I'm absolutely got all my I's dotted and T's crossed before I throw this out to town meeting, for fear that if we don't have it all put together by April of 2022 and it goes down, we've got, you know, it's clear where the path leads us. So that's just where I sit here today. But if I haven't said it enough tonight, I will keep saying it. Read the report. It's even better than the presentation, if you can believe it.
Thanks, Dave. Brenda?
I think I have a series of discontinuous thoughts or points to make. The first one of which is that I was able to skim the report today, and for me, the information kept saying the town has grown, the population has grown, the income has grown by a much bigger amount. The average median income has grown significantly compared to our median tax bill. So there is room in this town, I think, for more money to be collected in taxes to pay for the services that all of us seem to want. So it feels like we've got to be sort of starting from that place. The question is how to figure out how much the override or overrides need to be, and how to be very careful about the impact on those who haven't had those increases in income. But it does seem like there are multiple programs that might be helpful to sort of helping mitigate that negative impact on that third of the population while having the other 2/3 pay for what people can pay and in fact want. the thing that I've heard from people who listened to the presentation on Tuesday night, who aren't necessarily always part of town government the last few days, is people being struck by our quote unquote savings fund, our rainy day fund. And it doesn't make sense to people to not use that. No family doesn't use their savings when they have something big that they need to fill in for. So we need to find some way to use that money and or to explain to people how it's going to be used. I think anything else isn't gonna make sense to most people here in town. So I think there's no doubt that override or overrides are in our future. The question is how to put it together in a planful way that gets people to understand it and ready to support it. And I am listening to those of you who've been on AdCom longer and been part of this budgeting process longer than I have. And it does seem like preparing is the Hingham method. And I don't feel like we have maybe as much time to prepare as I certainly would wish for. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Brenda. Sarah?
Yeah, there was a question or conversation that I kind of had last night at the meeting, and Josh Ross spoke to it. He's here. I don't know if he wants to say something at some point later, but there was some mitigation. It sounded like there was already funding for it. And in one of the senior tax programs, there was already some funds set aside for that tax assistance program, and that year over year or whenever it started, the ask was actually quite a bit less than the funds that were available, and whether or not that's needs to be publicized better. I don't know, but I was interested to hear that there's some funding for mitigation already baked in here, and because I was thinking maybe that was what the unassigned fund balance could or should be used toward as we propose to town meeting an override that's going to have such a significant impact. You can, as Dave said, look people in the eye and say, but we've thought about this and there is money for people who can't pay that. We're not trying to make you move. And I don't think any of us would dare to think that. And so I was heartened to hear that not only has it been thought about, but that there's money there already toward that important need. That's all.
Thank you. So Al, if you wouldn't mind holding off for a minute, because we haven't heard yet from Kristen. I'm going to go next to Kristen and then I'll come back.
I just want to follow up with something that Dave had just said, and if someone can just clarify. So you're saying that a failed override would result in a reduction of force. So I understand that if you were going to go forward with an override, you have to have a balanced budget. So there's two scenarios, one with an override, one without. Could you present the override scenario, and then the other scenario is using the fund balance, or can you not do that? Like, is it an automatically reduction in force if it didn't pass?
Sue, Michelle?
I'm not sure. I think the way I've been thinking about how you'd have to structure the override in Article 6 would be the balanced budget and then some other chunk of money that would be subject to approval at the ballot. And if that didn't pass, then that sort of second appropriation wouldn't be available. But I'm not sure if there is a way to sort of say that's one scenario and the second scenario is the full amount, but that, that piece is coming from other funding sources. It's something I think we'd have to look at more. Maybe Sue knows better than I do.
I think the only way you could do that is if the override failed at town meeting. If the override failed at town meeting, I think someone could get up and say, well, why don't we use fund balance? But if override passes at town meeting and fails at the ballot, there is nothing we can do. We would have to go with the balanced budget that we present.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I believe that's how it happens.
Bob, you have your hand raised. You're gonna add, want to add to that?
I was going to try to answer that because I mean, we gave some thought to that last year with respect to Article 6. I suppose if the override went down, there could then be a motion for reconsideration. And that perhaps within that motion for reconsideration process, it might be possible for there to be a floor motion to amend the recommendation on Article 6 to include funds from fund balance. I don't know whether that would work or not. Sue seems to be shaking her head. The other thing that could happen conceivably is if the override went down, you could have a special town meeting a month later, or whatever you could do within the time frame that would again give you a second opportunity to vote. Just a couple of possibilities.
Thanks, Bob. Al?
First, I guess I'd answer differently that it's, in my mind, it's less about the machinations of logistically how that happens. It's more last year and potentially this year, we've spent millions of dollars hiring new people that if the override fails, we don't have money to continue paying them in the future. That even if next fiscal year you fill it with whatever one-time money, wherever it comes from, it's not a solution. It's at some point, whether you survive another year or not, at some point it goes away. And I guess that gets at thinking of both Dave Lean and Dave's comments. I totally agree. And that was last year. I totally agree. It's a very legitimate thing to put it before the town. Bob did a nice job at town meeting explaining this is what we're doing. So everyone knows, and we sort of said, but we're coming back next year. Again, I thought next year, that's what I meant by grumpy to Dave's thing. We kind of said we're coming back. Maybe you didn't say this year, but the implication was we're coming back to put this before you to see if we can hold it together. And I think that was in the end was a perfectly justifiable policy decision or strategy to address the challenges that we talked about last year in terms of pent up needs from previous years and pandemic implications. To all that, I guess that all further supports my pretty strong sentiment to stop digging and to not do where we're not going to be going to the town next year until next year, another subsequent year, to be asking, hey, can we fund all this partying we're doing? That's not fair. I should say. But we can't wait until next year to ask the town, can we fund all of these services and human resources that we're providing? I don't think we should. And if it fails next year, we've done more damage by hiring more people this year, making the hole bigger.
Thanks, Al. Gina?
It's so hard when I agree with everything everyone has said. Really, so many amazing perspectives on this. And I was thinking about it, like, why does it bother me so much? And I remember the adage that you hear all the time from, all the projects I've done in town. You have to be careful about how many times you go back to the well. So my biggest concern, I think, with all this is that with what we say at town meeting, Foster, which I'm really worried people are going to have sticker shock on, the public safety facility building, and then an override. I just worry that one of those may be in jeopardy. And I think that's why I'm so nervous about putting this off and using our one-time money, is because it is that will all be such a significant impact. And it's asking an awful lot. And I'm just not sure that our citizens are going to keep saying yes. I guess that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Tina. Brenda?
Sorry, the point that I realized I forgot to make was one of the pieces of data in the report that I was really struck by is the 1,314 individuals in town who live below the poverty line. That includes 212 families with 480 children. So we're not just talking about seniors that will have trouble with increases in taxes. We're talking about parents of kids and families. So our programs need to expand beyond the seniors ones that we already know about. Although the other piece of data was that the prediction by 2035 is that Hingham will have an even bigger number of seniors. So as baby boomers continue to age. So, but just wanted to keep that population in our minds as well.
Thanks, Brenda. Any other AdCom members have any questions for Michelle?
Hey,
Sure.
Julie.
Hi, Evan.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I can't
Joined
put my
our
hand
meeting.
up. Yeah, I'm in a car. Sorry. I just, if I could, what Tina said really struck me, and I agree with her that I agree with every point that's been made this evening. And in my mind, we're not delaying the needs, right? We're just delaying taking action on the needs by filling the hole yet again. So I get the risk of putting something before the town and having it not pass, but that could happen anytime we do this. So we have this collective amnesia every year around this time around how we kind of got here. And there's been so much more work done this year, and the report is excellent. I agree, but I really struggle with punting yet again and delaying taking a decision or putting it before the people who need to make that decision. And that's all the folks in town. So sorry for jumping in. I just couldn't figure out how to raise my hand on my phone.
No, that's fine. That's good to hear from you, Evan. Thank you. George?
Yeah, Julie, thanks again. Just, kind of a basic thing that I think we have to make sure we don't lose track of. And that is, in any kind of a budgeting scenario, operating expenses have to have a source of revenue to cover them. And, fund balance is a nice big pot of money, and it's probably more money than we should have in it, but it is not the solution for covering operating expenses. It's just not.
Thanks, George. Sarah?
Yeah, I had a clarification question about something Bob said earlier. So in terms of making a decision here about whether we actually, support an override this year or next year, that's not up to us. That's up to the select board. Is that correct, Bob?
Yeah, if you look at,
I don't know how the process works there.
if you look at the DOR pamphlet on overrides,
Yeah, I gotta read that.
which really gives an excellent exposition.
Yeah.
And it's up to the select board to determine whether to put it on a ballot or not. The advisory committee doesn't do that, and the select board drafts the ballot question. And then there are different ways of doing an override. There can be menu overrides where you could have extra funds to be appropriated for one line or another line. There's maybe Michelle can weigh in on that. I don't know whether there's any present thinking on the form of an override, but it's something else that I think needs some careful consideration and preparation.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just want to make sure, to Evan's point, how do we ensure that if we don't move in that direction this year and the select board decides not to, how do we ensure that we do move in that direction for next year? Because I think what we're all agreeing that what they said was so compelling. We're just not keeping up with our budget needs.
Well, I mean, if I can jump back in again. I mean, it looks like we're gonna have a special town meeting in the fall on at least two major capital projects. And I'd anticipate that most of the concerns that have been expressed about using our unrestricted fund balance are going to be addressed through the articles presented at that special town meeting. And of course, we don't have to just bring the unrestricted town balance down to 20%. We could bring it down as low as 16% and still be in compliance with our financial policy.
Okay.
So it has been, you know, I don't want people to get the impression that, you know, somehow we've been sitting on this hoard without properly using it. I think it's been anticipated for many years now. I mean, have in mind that, you know, Foster's been on the drawing board for at least 5 or more years. And it's been anticipated that this would be a fund that would help defray those costs. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And the Board of Selectmen, yes, would make the decision, but I know that they want to hear input from the advisory committee, and it's not, you know, we have discussions ahead of us that we can take with them, so.
Okay.
Michelle, do you want to add anything?
Oh, I don't think so. Thank you.
Hey, Julie, I'm sorry. I'm doing it one more time. I just want to clarify. The only thing I've disagreed with was, and Tina, don't take this personally, was the you know, can't go back to the well multiple times. To me, that's kind of part of this narrative that we don't do overrides in Hingham, and it's kind of a bad thing. And to me, that's something that the town needs to choose to do collectively, and be educated on why we need to do it, and then take the decision. And they may decide to do it or not. Again, if you know, you looked at the other towns in our, and Andy will love this, our benchmark groups, an average of 4 overrides in the last 20 years, and we've done 2. So it is clear to me that people do use this as a mechanism, and the pamphlet that Bob talks about is excellent, by the way, as a way to kind of alleviate the pressure of 2.5% growth. And then we also have to cut ourselves some slack with the inflationary pressure we've seen in the country in the last year. I mean, that's piled on to what we're already dealing with. And so this is a vehicle that allows you to alleviate those pressures and stresses kind of on the kind of proposition 2.5. So I just wanted to make that point.
Just to respond to that, Evan, I don't disagree with you at all in what you said, but that's just been sort of as you said, that's been the conventional wisdom. It's what I've heard for the last 20 years working on town projects. And one of the things that I'm taking that to mean, though, is we have to be thoughtful about what we're asking the taxpayer for. And I think spreading that impact over a longer period of time and in smaller increments would be a wiser course of action towards the taxpayer than waiting till next year and using short-term money to fill this hole. And I do agree with Ellen too, not make it any bigger if we're going to do that.
Thanks, Tina and Evan. Caitlin?
Thanks, Julie. My question might be for Michelle. What I can't wrap my head around is so next year we have the reval, right, for taxes. And so if you were to, like, are some residents in the town, would they be like even more impacted by a tax increase plus the impact that's going to hit them from a reval perspective?
Potentially, yes. Like, so if, you know, if all properties in town rise at the same rate, then no, because if everything goes up, then the tax rate goes down. But if certain properties go up relevant to other ones, then yes, then that would be a higher share of the
Okay.
tax levy.
So like all the renovations that have been happening across town the last year and a half. Right, that makes sense to me. So some of them would be higher than what's going on in the town.
And usually, so when there's like renovations, home improvements, that's all captured in the new growth number. That does become a permanent part of the base going forward. So that usually does result, you know, and say you add an addition, your assessed property value goes up from that and your bill therefore goes up, but that doesn't affect the rate. That's sort of added to, it makes the levy bigger.
Okay, that's helpful.
So I see Josh Ross's hand raised. I know that Josh, you're on the Board of Assessors. So do you have something that you want to say about that?
I do, if it's okay if I speak.
Yep.
Do I need to do name and address like everything else?
Yes, please.
Okay, Joshua Ross, 125 Wampatuck Road. So I guess give a little more color on that. This year, our tax rate went down, right? It went from 11.83% down to 11.56%, which is the second lowest in the last 10 years. In addition, we added a new category this year. I say we, but Aaron in the office added a new category of housing at the estate level, because the levels that we've had couldn't capture some of the assessed values of some of these homes over the recent years, because our categories couldn't go that high. The system we use, we couldn't put in a high enough number, so we had to create a new category. And so 29 homes in Hingham are now considered estates, which means their assessed values went up a pretty significant amount. And like I believe Caitlin just said, we are doing a reval next year. And so the anticipation is that a lot of the houses that are not true to value will go up. And my guess is those are on the higher end more than the lower end. And which means that the tax rate is come down even more. Because these values keep going up, and as everyone knows, with Prop 2.5, you can't go over that amount. So again, it's just to give a little bit more background on as we are looking to true up and get close to the reval, some of these property values will go up. And so if there isn't an override, the tax rate will continue to fall. And so some of these folks who we talk about all the time, who we don't want to price out, are those the ones that tend to be in the lower end of the price range for homes. And so their tax bill will actually go down as the tax bills go down. So it's just another piece that I hope everyone looks at and digs into the numbers when we start talking about income and housing values and that number, because like Sarah said, we had $500,000 this year set aside in the overlay account to basically do these circuit breakers or exemptions, and we used a fraction of it. And now some of it's because it's the first year, and we hope to get more and more people. You know, even I talked to a neighbor who would qualify. He just didn't want to give his personal information, which I understand, but we need to do a better job to educate these folks. But my sense is that we could cover everyone we needed to cover with some sort of program on both ends of the spectrum, whether it be younger families in poverty or older folks in poverty, with some sort of exemption or program, and still do the increases that we need to do. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That's helpful. What my mind is spinning on, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other AdCom members have any questions or want to say anything? I want to stress that we are going to be talking about this on and off for weeks. We have a goal. We have to close in. We have to land this plane, so to speak. And We don't have to make any decisions tonight, of course not, but I just would like to continue this dialogue and we'll probably change our minds about 10 different times about what we're thinking, but that's okay. It's a process and we are getting more information in. Next week, obviously Tuesday night, we're going to see the updated forecast. You've seen the document itself, but I think it'll be important when we go through that document in our joint meeting on Tuesday, that we'll get some information and it'll be put in context, and we'll get more information as the weeks come along, that the forecast will get refined again. So, Kristen?
Just another question again. It seems like a lot of people still want to move forward with this for this year, and if it's possible or not, we don't know. But is there a way to start meeting with the select board to discuss this with them? Like, we're going to keep having discussions every week, but if we're not having it with them, we're just going in circles again, like I feel like we did last year. So I understand it's their ultimate decision, but do we need to get with them to give our opinions so it can move forward?
Yes, we'll have the opportunity to speak with the select board and working on that, but this is not going to be a bunch of circular arguments that we have. with
And
ourselves. We're going
ditto to what Kristen just said for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to be an agenda item for AdCom every time we meet now for us to have a discussion amongst ourselves. I just, we are going to collaborate with the select board, and we hear more information, and they have their own deliberations, and so.
No, this is the most, just to be clear, I agree with Kristen, but this is the most we've ever discussed this, and it's a really good thing. But, you know, the definition of institutional insanity is doing the same thing and getting the same result each time. So I hope we get a little, closer to getting some action perhaps this year.
Well, we'll find out more in the coming weeks, and thank you. Thank you all for your thoughts tonight. I appreciate it. Okay, so next on our agenda, we're going backwards quickly because Sarah, we have Article C, and I held it for you, Sarah, because
Thank you.
The actual language of the article had to change because
Yes.
there were some things omitted. So take it away.
Okay, thank you guys for your patience. The 5th grade all-town chorus concert was worth it. To me anyway. Okay, so the language in Article C did change. I think essentially some of the names of the committees were just tightened up, but then a couple were added. I did circulate it, so I can read through them. I can't remember looking at it, which ones were not there before and which ones are there now. I can read through the Article C if people would like me to. The comment did not change. So I'm happy to read through the revised Article C. Is that, Julie, probably the best way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, I'm like fiddling with my papers. I do, Bob? I do have the list of changes.
We don't get to revise the article.
No, I think the select board revised it, and
Did the select board revise it?
yes.
They
Okay.
did.
Yes, so I
They
just
did it and they
incorporated
voted
those
on the
revisions.
correct language.
Yeah.
So sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't say that clearly enough, but it was a catch made by the select board voted, they changed the language and they voted on it already.
Right.
So what we looked at last week was missing the public safety building committee, the senior center building committee. There was a word in there called the historian, and that was taken out, and the town historian was added. The tree preservation study committee was added. Wastewater master
planning, yep.
And,
I think it added the words
Weir
Weir River.
water system.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Weir River Water System Citizens Advisory Board was added. And then in the final one, it had just said water system transition, and we added Weir River Water System Transition and Evaluation Committee. So those were the changes that I recall.
Okay. Well, thank you for
And I think Commission
that.
on Disability became Commission on Disabilities, plural. That was the other change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it just needed a little bit of cleanup.
Little
So-
tweaks, yeah.
So with that, now we are in a position to be able to vote on Article C on the recommended motion as was covered at our meeting last week. The recommended motion stays the same. So can I get a motion to approve? I don't think I'm saying any of this correctly. But we need to vote on the recommended motion.
Well, if you need
So
a,
moved.
Help my lawyers.
I'd second the recommended motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, a roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy?
Sorry,
I think. Dave?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye, aye, aye.
thank you. Dabeline?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
I skipped Andy McElhaney, didn't I? Andy?
You're not the first.
Brenda?
You already got me.
Okay. Kristen?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Caitlin?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Okay. So what's that, 13?
That's
Is
what
that
I
right,
got.
Nancy? Okay.
I have
Thank you.
13-0.
Okay, that's it for our warrant article votes and tonight. And just last thing I'll touch on is the discussion of advisory committee housekeeping items. So next Tuesday, we meet again. That's February 8th. First on our agenda at 7 p.m. is a joint session with the select board and the school committee to hear the school committee budget presentation, but we're also going to hear first the updated 5-year forecast. And so on our agenda, there'll be a separate Zoom link for the start of the meeting. So you go into that, and I double checked, it's going to be a Tuesday night Zoom connection, so we don't have a problem. We will connect to the meeting correctly. Bob, you have a question about that?
No, I have a couple of housekeeping items I just want to bring up once you finish.
Okay, thank you. So then we're going to recess and reconvene in our own AdCom meeting, and we're going to hear Articles O. We're going to hear the South Shore Country Club articles of P and Q, Article U, and maybe Article CC, which is the transfer station land transfer to HMLP. And then looking ahead to Thursday, the 10th, the goal is to have AdCom hear the water company budget, the 2 water company articles, and the 4 articles that are relating to the schools, including the Hingham High School tennis courts and the pre-construction costs for Foster School. That's all I have. Bob?
Yeah, the first thing, I just wanted my memory refreshed on where the editing break is, because I've got Article M, which is right in the middle. And I forget whether, I think it's Tina's, but
So Tina's the first
is.
half. So she's got your article, Bob. It's
Okay,
the
great.
break is it's A to Q goes to Tina,
okay.
and then R beyond goes to Dabeline.
And the second thing I wanted to make an observation about was the letter that you circulated that was received by Sue that, repeats a misunderstanding that we saw many times last year about somehow the school budget being level funded. And of course, the school budget hasn't been level funded ever, I think. And it's been a level services budget. And I think to the extent that all of us can, maybe in our communities, maybe erase some of this misunderstanding, it would be useful. That's all I got to say.
I caught that too, Bob. I think, well, I guess we could talk it up in our meetings if people attend our meetings and they clarify, make it, or so we're clear about it. So maybe that'll filter out that way, but.
That's not nearly as bad as the cowardly AdCom that was on social media a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, there's a ton of misinformation out there about what we do and how stuff works. I mean, you can't fix some of that.
For what it's worth, I never heard the school committee refer to the school budget as being level funded. They are very clear that it's level services. So I'm with you, Bob. Obviously, you're preaching to the choir with this crowd, but I hear you, and it's a good point.
Okay, matters not anticipated within.
Does that suggest that somebody should respond to this letter?
Oh.
Just tune in.
No, I just, when someone writes a letter to the select board and the advisory committee, do we not respond to those? I mean, other than, letters that obviously don't seek a response that say, I support whatever sustainable budget, or, task force, I support the climate control director. Do we not respond to these letters as a matter of course?
Generally, no, in my experience. I mean, for example, last year, we got dozens of letters that use this level funding terminology in them. And there are advocacy groups out there that, have multiple members basically send the same kind of letter. The same thing happened with the water company. And I mean, for the chair or an administrator to try to add that to what they're doing already, I think is not a fruitful use of resources.
Thanks, Bob. Unless you want to take it on, Andy, be our official correspondence secretary.
I think Andy should have a personal outreach to the author of said letter and explain to them how this actually works. What do you think?
I can write a really short letter.
You've got a lot of explaining to do, Andy.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Matters not anticipated within 48 hours of the meeting. Okay. Thanks,
Brenda has
Brenda.
Brenda had her hand
Brenda.
up.
Yeah, sorry. Do we have any idea when we will get the town administrator's recommended budget?
No.
It's a very missing piece in the process.
I know.
Okay, all right.
You're right.
About the-
It is one of those outstanding pieces of information that will inform decisions, and I know it's a priority for Tom Mayo and the and his group, so it's a priority for them.
I'm not sure why it is that it's not clear whether the light plant land transfer article will happen next week or not, but what I do know, having listened to their most recent meeting, is that they are developing a model to show that rate increases for utility purchasers from them will not increase with this new transmission project, which is probably relevant information that I would want to include in the comment, but that data isn't set yet. So is there a way that that could be held off for a while they continue to develop this? They're going to the town's financial advisors to kind of firm up their numbers.
Sure. I mean, I know there was a question about whether CC would be even heard tonight by the select board. So obviously, if it wasn't heard by the select board, which I don't know for sure, but I'll be able to verify tomorrow that we wouldn't hear it on Tuesday. And sure, if we don't have all the information, then we should not rush into it. So I'll be in
Land
touch
transfer
with you tomorrow about it, Brenda.
straightforward, but the implications of the land transfer, I think people will have questions about. So anyway, okay.
Caitlin?
Okay, I have another question that I'm trying to like gravel in my head.
Mhm.
So if we're saying that, so obviously the budget for the schools have been growing over time. And we're saying that, okay, so they're not level funded because that's growing, but are people in the town looking at it from, even if it's level services, we're not investing more in in our education systems because we're just investing in the same services? And is maybe instead of, could that where this person be coming from?
Can I just, like, level funded and level services are actual definitions that
Right.
people just need to familiarize themselves with.
Yeah.
The fact that they don't understand it is not an advisory committee, nor is it a school committee problem.
But I guess I'm generally asking, so if we're saying level services, to me, that means that we're just providing the same services. And
Correct,
that's
but the
gonna
budget
result in
grows.
an increase of budget because the number of students are going up and the ratios need to change, et cetera. But fundamentally, you're supporting the same level of services for students. You're not increasing the services.
I don't think the school committee budget is a level service budget. I mean, last year, how many people did they hire last year? 36?
And how much learning loss, like, did we put on our kids for the last 2 years that?
No, I understand
parents are
that,
taking
but
out
that's,
on the back end?
that's
I
not.
mean, I don't think we need to get into I'm just saying just generally, like, maybe that's where this person is coming from.
Well, what she says in her third sentence, much light has been shed on the drastic underfunding in years past. And being a young family in town, the schools are what brought us to Hingham. Needless to say, it's been a rough entry and a disheartening early experience. I don't believe I have seen drastic underfunding of the schools in Hingham. So if that's her premise, I disagree.
We're wading into
You know,
a
we're gonna-
totally geared end of the pool right now. We're talking
I know, I was gonna-
definitionally.
We're,
Yeah,
we're, right, we're going to a place that we're not going to tonight, okay? We're gonna talk about the school budget. We're gonna hear the budget next Tuesday. We're gonna have an opportunity to discuss the budget more. I think that Bob was pointing out that there's a definition, like Evan said as well, that level funding and level services are actually different things. And Bob is saying that, you know, there seems to be those words used out there that perhaps are not the correct use of the words. So that's just it. And we're not gonna, it's not a practice to write letters back to people. We will hear input from people in our hearings, and that's all I'd like to say about any of that. So for now. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Javeline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Al,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Hi.
Sarah.
Aye.